Hola, buenos días chicos y chicas. Happy Friday. Welcome to another video. In this video, I want to talk to y'all about 3 language learning techniques that I personally have used to overcome the intermediate plateau and to reach an advanced level of Spanish. So yeah, let's jump right in. The first one is something called shadowing, which I first heard about through a podcast, the podcast How to Spanish podcast. It's really great. I recommend you check it out. The idea is really simple. Basically, you listen to something, so like a podcast, an audiobook, a YouTube video, and as you're listening, you're speaking along with it, saying whatever the person talking is saying. Sounds kind of strange, and when you do it at first, it feels a little bit weird because you're always like a millisecond behind the person in the video or the audio. But it has some really, really great benefits. So there's 2 benefits I want to talk about that go along with shadowing. The first benefit is that it helps you a ton in your pronunciation. Because the idea behind it is that as you're listening, you're reproducing the sound exactly as you hear it. So a lot of times people will suggest that you find someone with an accent that you really like, that you want to emulate, and then as you're shadowing, you try to sound just like that person. So it's really great for your pronunciation. And the second thing about shadowing is that it helps you focus more on the audio, because I think one thing that happens when you're in that intermediate plateau is that you don't have 100% comprehension of what you're hearing, and so it can be really easy to like lose focus. And so having something very specific to focus on, in this case, reproducing the sounds that you're hearing, it just helps you focus more on the audio, and for that reason, it's great for the intermediate plateau. I'm gonna jump right into the second thing, which is transcription. So this one is, I guess, like less well known within the language learning community. It's actually way more common in the music learning community, especially like learning jazz music. What people will suggest is that you find like a jazz artist that you really like and you transcribe their solos. So you listen to the stuff that they play, and you listen to it a bunch until you kind of have it memorized in your head, and then you actually write it down using notes on paper, right? And it's super helpful for learning music because you're learning what's called the vocabulary of that musical artist. You're learning those musical ideas that they implement. And interestingly enough, I think the same technique can be used for learning a language, and it's super, super useful. So I want to talk to you a little bit about my process for transcribing a language. What I usually do is I'll find a short video about something that interests me. There's a lot of really great channels for this on YouTube. I'll link some of those below in the description. But I'll find like a 3 to 5 minute video maybe. I'll listen to it a couple times until I feel comfortable with it, and then I'll start transcribing it. So again, transcribing is when you listen to something and then you write it down. You might think of like somebody who transcribes in a courtroom, for example, where like as you're listening, you're writing at the same time. That's not really how it works with language learning. Because it's more of a process where you have to maybe listen to 10 seconds at a time, you pause it, you reflect on those 10 seconds, and then write down whatever you hear. Maybe you have to go back and listen again, fill in some of the gaps. So it's definitely a laborious process. It's not super easy. It takes time. For a 3 to 5 minute video, it could take me up to an hour to transcribe, especially when I was first starting out with it. Nowadays, I can do it a lot quicker, but it's still a lot of like pausing, restarting, that sort of thing. But it's good for a lot of different things. For one, it's a good way to get your comprehension up to 100%, because maybe the first time you watch that video, you're only understanding 75-80% of it. But by doing that like really meticulous process of writing down every single word that you're hearing, every single phrase, you're internalizing those things that you didn't know before you watched the video, whether that's vocabulary, grammar structure, conjugations, whatever it is. So yeah, transcribing is really, really great, and I would recommend that. Before I get on to this third technique that I use, I want to say something more about both shadowing and transcribing, because there's something else that I do to kind of combine these 2 things. What I like to do is I'll find one of those 3 to 5 minute videos, and then I go through a very specific process. So I'm going to read out these steps to you so that you can try it on your own. So you find this 3 to 5 minute video. Step one is just watch the video. Watch it, maybe watch it twice even, and you're just kind of absorbing whatever. You absorb what you absorb. Try to understand as much as you can. The second step is transcribing it. So you go through that process that I just described to you where, again, it's this meticulous process of writing down everything that you're hearing, all the words, all the phrases, as if you're making a script, right? Third step is you're going to study the words and phrases that you don't know from the transcription. So this is a really important step because this is how you're going to, acquire new vocabulary. And this step of studying the unknown words and phrases usually I would spread out over a couple of days. So I wouldn't just try to do it all at once. I would take maybe a week. In a 3 to 5 minute video, maybe there's 20, 30 words you don't know. Study those 20 to 30 words over the course of the week until you feel like you're pretty comfortable with their definition. You can use them pretty fluidly in a sentence, etc. And that's step 3. Step 4, you're going to use that shadowing technique. But you're not just going to shadow based on the listening. You're also going to read the transcription that you have. Okay? So step 4, you're shadowing, you're speaking along with the video as you're reading the script. So that's going to be super helpful to combine those two things. And then the final step, this is kind of optional, but after I do all of that, what's really rewarding for me is just, put away my transcription and just watch the video as if it was the first time I was watching it. And it's just the coolest feeling to realize that in the beginning you had, 75, 80% comprehension of the video, but now that you've gone through this 5-step process, you have 100% or 99% comprehension of the video. It's a really, really cool feeling. And for me, that process has helped motivate me a lot because in just a week, you feel like you've learned so many new things. It's awesome. All right, that all brings me to my last point, or my last technique, and it's called the Rosetta Stone method. I think I first read about this on Reddit, and then I did some research. I'm not sure who invented it or where it comes from. But no, it is not the language learning app Rosetta Stone. It is a process where you take a book, you take a novel, or any sort of book, I suppose, and then that becomes your Rosetta Stone for the language. What I mean by that is that becomes kind of like your holy grail, what you use to study primarily for an extended period of time. And I've done it so far with 2 books, and so I can talk in depth a little bit about the process. The first book that I chose to use for this method is this book that I have right here. It's called La Malinche by Laura Esquivel, who's a Mexican author. It's a super good book. I was recommended it by a couple people before I went ahead and decided to choose it for this method. If you're interested, you can look up more about what the book's about, but highly recommend. It's a novel. It's a historical fiction written for native speakers, but I wouldn't say it's like a super hard read. It's a pretty intermediate level read. But again, it is written for native speakers. And so the first step to this process is just reading the book, but with the caveat that every time you encounter a word that you don't know, you have to write it down in a notebook or on your phone or wherever. You have to take note of that word or phrase that is unfamiliar to you. If it feels like something super important to the plot of the book, you can look it up right at that point while you're reading. Otherwise, you just keep reading like normal and just make note of that word that you didn't know. And you read the whole book like that. So when I got to the end of this book, I think I had maybe about 400 words that I had written down, 400 words and phrases. And that's step 1. Step 2 is really similar to what I just talked about with the transcribing and the shadowing, is going to be to study those words. However, in this case, 400 words is obviously going to take you a lot longer to study. So I think when I did it with this book, I studied for about a month those words, and I used flashcards, which I highly recommend. The application Anki, if you don't already use it, super amazing flashcard app. Check it out. It's going to help you a lot. But anyways, you study those 400 words. Like I said, I think it took me about a month, so I was learning 12-ish new words a day. And yeah, you do that until you feel super comfortable with all of those words. You might have already guessed what the next step is. You're going to reread the book. You're going to reread the book now having all that knowledge of those new words. And that's pretty much the whole process. But the really the magic behind this method is that that second time that you read the book, you literally have like 99% comprehension. And again, it's what I was saying before with the video. First time you read it, maybe you're understanding 75%, 80% of the book. That second time, you're understanding almost the entire thing. There's almost nothing that gets by you because you've studied the specific things that you didn't understand that first time around. And then some people will suggest that, you put the book down for a while and then you read it even a third time, maybe 6 months later or something. I haven't done that just because, I'm always looking for new content, and I think I would get bored reading the same book over and over and over. But that said, I do highly, highly recommend this method, especially because for me, it just is a huge motivator when you can read something and just understand it 100%. It's the coolest feeling, and it really helps you along your language journey. So there you have it. There are the 3 techniques for overcoming that intermediate plateau. I hope that these techniques are helpful for you and that you can implement them. Again, check out the description below if you want to see some of those resources that I use to implement these various techniques. And definitely leave a comment if you have any other questions or anything else you want to share about how you yourself have been able to overcome that intermediate plateau. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next one.